Hello there and welcome back to Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, and once again we're on the tropical paradise of Pelagos. Last week I talked about how we're growing large quantities of coconuts over here and how we're getting some very useful resources out of that. How we're digging up a certain amount of iron ore over here and making lots and lots of steel because everything we need on this planet is very steel hungry. And also how we're slowly eating away at some of our islands in an attempt to make enough stone to allow us to produce all the other things we need. The next thing I want to talk about is, I'm going to start off with the methane, but also as part of that I'm going to talk about how we're transporting stuff around. So methane is found in patches around in the sea, and that can be pulled out by placing down an oil rig over it here, like the one that Mike has placed in here, and then Tristan has built a station to work with. And transporting stuff around can then be done by the use of cargo ships. And cargo ships are, well, functionally, both in the way we're using them and in the way they work on the back end, they are basically trains. So in this case you can see we've got one trundling in here, and if we click on the front of it we can see all of the cargo which it's carrying, which at the moment is lots and lots of empty barrels. And if I manage to click on the back of it, which I don't seem to be able to do because it's on a corner, or oh, there we go, then we get a sort of a standard train type interface which allows you to set up the locations where it's going to. When this ship pulls into port, there is a cunning system set up here that will unload all of the empty barrels out of it, and this is going to be a bit of a frenzy when it pulls in, as we'll see in a second, like that. There we go, they're all being brought out, and then they're being filled with the methane that's being pulled out of the pump here, and unfortunately that seems to run out rather quickly because we've been using this methane patch quite heavily, and it seems to now be running relatively slowly. We are getting through quite a lot of methane on this planet. Tristan has done quite an interesting thing with this station though that's definitely worth looking into. Along here there are a large number of inserters which are loading and unloading the ship. And in fact I'm going to get rid of the ship because it's going to make it a bit easier to see what's going on if I just tell the ship to get lost and get out of the way. So we'll move the ship out. There we go, off it goes. Shoo. And we can see over here that, well, okay, we've got all of these inserters along here that are currently fueled by methane gas, which is why they've got the green cloud on them. And all of these ones are along here are set to load methane barrels into the ship when it arrives. So the methane barrels will get put into these chests and then passed into the ship. Okay, great. But then how do you get the barrels out? Because we saw those being unloaded. Well, the answer to that is there are also then some filtered inserters across the top here that are filtered to just empty barrels. And you can tell because you can see the symbols on them. And this works because Pelagos offers you three types of inserter. There's the normal short inserter, which picks up from a square next to it and places down on the square on the other side of it, like this. So standard single square range inserter. Then there's a normal long inserter. It was a diesel one, of course, but it's a long-handled diesel inserter, and that picks up from 2 squares away and puts down 2 squares on the other side. And then finally, there's the extra long-handed diesel inserter, which picks up from 3 squares away and places down 3 squares away on the other side. So these will pass even further. And so having that has allowed Tristan to put in a row of these really long inserters along here, which are taking out the empty barrels and then putting them into these chests all the way up here. Then he can have a row of short inserters across the top here that are taking those empty barrels and putting them in the barreling machines. And then he can have another row of extra long inserters across the middle here, which are taking from the barreling machines at the top and then passing down and putting them in this row of chests. And then finally, there's an extra row of inserters along here, short inserters, which will take the barrels out of the chests and put them into the ship. So with this system, you can actually get the barrels being taken out and put back in this along the same squares without needing any belts and without having any sort of tangle of anything. So we've got long inserters taking from wherever the barrels come from and putting them in a row of chests, and then a row of short inserters taking from the chests and putting them into wherever the barrels need to go, so the barreling machines or the ship. This is a weird system, and it looks very odd, but it does work, and it allows him to get twice the throughput in this area that we would otherwise get. And even better, since the barreling machines are 1x1 single square buildings, this allows loading and unloading from the same side, meaning he hasn't had to use a belt to carry the barrels back round. If they were larger, 2x2 buildings perhaps, then barrels could be put in the left side and out on the right, but this required a different solution. And that level of throughput is quite valuable because the ships move pretty slowly because, well, they're cargo ships. So this, you can see the ship trundling along quite slowly down here. It's made it this far so far and is now almost arriving at the port back down here where the barrels can then be unloaded. But they are quite slow moving, especially compared to trains, which, as you've seen, will just zip around the landscape really quickly. So that said though, they have an enormous amount of storage space. They have 500 stacks available inside them, and that is a lot of capacity. is more capacity than a train with 10 wagons on it. So it's kind of worth it, and they are very, very effective at transporting large quantities of stuff. You just can't use it for urgent transportation. And then the other end we have a slightly different system where we've got only 2 inserters pulling out over here and then passing upwards. However, we do have the doubling up system running it once again. So we've got 2 pairs of 2 unloading, and the same for loading the empty barrels back in. So the idea up here is the barrels are being chucked into the unbarreling machine here, which is taking the methane gas out of them, shoving it into the tanks here, and then the empty barrels can be passed quickly back down into the ship, ready for it to go again. And once again, we're trying to do this reasonably quickly. If we do want to speed it up even further in the future, then there is plenty of room to expand over here and use additional inserters and additional belts and so on. But at the moment, that isn't necessary. We're using quite a lot of methane on this island, but we're not using that much, so it is actually okay. There is also an additional fueling system available on the side here. However, I believe this has now stopped being used, and so the ships do require fuel, and in this case we are running them off barrels of methane, which is nice and easy. And so back over at the methane plant, the methane mine, you can see we've got a system here where we're taking out any empty barrels from the bridge of the ship, passing them up here to be then put into the barreling machine, reloaded with methane gas, and then put back into the ship. So that ensures that we've always got plenty of methane available in there to power the ship. There is also an additional refueling station up here, which has exactly the same system set up. So the ship pulls in, and it will then have its empty barrels taken out, have them refilled and placed back in again, with the intention of just refueling any ship that comes in. And one of the things that you'll notice, which I have actually rather broken by the fact that I sent the ship away in the middle of loading up, is that the barrels are all intended to be sort of linked to the ship. So it's not coming over here and collecting a large number of methane barrels and then dropping the methane barrels off here and then going off to go and get some more. The idea is that it's unloading the methane barrels. Those barrels will be emptied and then given back to it. So this ship has its own set of barrels, which will always be loaded back into it, which will then take back over to here to fill up, and then it will take all of those barrels back over to here to empty. So if we had another ship that we wanted to run around here, it would first have to be loaded up with its own set of barrels before it would be okay to send it over to the methane mine area in order to fill it up with methane barrels. So this methane transport system is a little bit weird and convoluted, but it does work very nicely. So we're very happy with it at the moment. The only problem seems to be that this mine over here is running a bit low. I'm not quite sure how much it's producing, because over there on the right it says the mining speed is 1 per second and that it's producing 40.1 clouds of methane per second. But then a bit further down it says the expected resources are 9 clouds of methane per second. So there are 3 different numbers in there. I'm guessing it's the 40, and the expected resources, well, expected resources is normally the amount left. So I'm not quite sure how this all hangs together and what it's supposed to mean. But we do seem to be running a bit low, so it's probably going to be time to make another copy of that and put it on another methane patch, perhaps over here or anywhere else where we can see a decent amount of methane available. Now that we're zoomed out, you can see all the tracks that the ships will follow, and these are shipping lanes, and these are things that you can just place, and they don't cost any resources at all. You can just place them wherever you like, in exactly the same way that you place railway line blueprints on Norvis, and then the ships will just follow them as if they're trains and as if they're following railway lines. You can also put in signals, which come in the form of buoys. These will be placed down here. We have 2 types. There's a signal buoy, and then there is also a chain signal buoy, and they work in exactly the way you would expect. So the ships follow exactly the same sort of navigation system as a train would, which makes them really, really easy to lay out, especially when you've got as much experience with trains as we have. However, because the railway line, in inverted commas, is completely free, and there is so much space available, we've not bothered to try and make a nice grid of railway lines going out here. We've just placed them more or less wherever we feel like, because it doesn't matter. The ships can trundle around, and as long as you put your buoys in on these junctions like this, and that looks very weird with those 2 lurking like that, but as long as you get the buoys in a sensible place so you don't have any ships colliding, then you're going to be absolutely fine, and you can have them crossing over and things like that. And we decided that the feel that we wanted on this planet was ships just trundling around through the waterways rather than being all locked into specific lines. And so this is the way that we're going to be building these up. Every time we put in a new ship or a new shipping route, we'll lay out its own set of shipping lanes for it to follow. And I think because ships are so slow, this has an added benefit, because it means that the ships will be able to get there as quickly as reasonably possible. So far we only have a couple of ships set up. There's the methane one over here that we've seen that is actually currently broken, and that's entirely my fault. It wouldn't have done that if I hadn't gone in and fiddled with it. And then there's a second one that's sitting down here, gradually being loaded up with the resources from Coconut Island. And I've set up some circuitry down here that's monitoring what's in the ship using the feed coming out from the station, passing that down here to a combinator which is negating it, and then adding it onto another combinator where we're saying we'd like to have 1,500 coconut oil barrels, 7,500 activated carbon, and 7,500 sealant. And that means that we'll end up with 150 stacks of each one of those things in there because they have different stack sizes. And that'll be 450 stacks in total, which means there's plenty of room in the ship and we're not going to actually overload it, but we're going to have a decent amount of stuff in there. Now, some of these numbers are a little bit out, and that's because I messed up something down here. Oh yes, I didn't put the output in on the arithmetic combinator. I forgot to put that signal in. So this carried on loading, and that's why it's currently got 9,000 sealant and 8,100 activated carbon. But it'll work in the future, and it'll work next time. Additionally, I then have the resources, yes, being brought in like this, but I'm reading all of the chests across here that the resources get put into, and then passing that down at this red cable, the one on the right or in the middle, and that comes down to here and feeds to these three pieces of belt over here. And then these are being used to tell the system how much of the each of the resources that we want to pass through and fit into the chests up here. And the idea is there should be an entire shipload's worth of resources in here, and then when they're full, it will then block off the belts along here and stop the sealant or the carbon or the barrels going through, and make sure that we have everything up in the barrack chests up here ready to load the ship, but not any extra of any of those things, to make sure that we can have enough of each of them, because the capacity of these chests is ever so slightly more than the capacity of the ship. These belts are quite so long because I built the port some way out to sea, and that meant I had to build on wooden platform, because as I discussed in the last video, you can only go out to a certain distance with the landfill before you run into the deep water and it doesn't work. However, on the wooden platform, you can't place splitters. So this is, well, it's not quite as far up as I could have gone. You see there's a little bit more landfill up here before it goes onto the wooden platform, so I could have moved them a little bit further up, but basically this is roughly as far up as we could get with the splitters before it started to cause any problems. It looks a bit weird, but other than that, it's absolutely fine. When we shouldn't end up with anything sitting on these belts, because there should always be room in the chests up at the top to empty the belts. It's also worth mentioning we've used the logistic boat network system over here. So this is a logistic port, and that means we've got the standard LTN signals, we've got the LTN output, and we've got the LTN input, so we can send signals into those. So in the future, if we want to, we could set up all of our ports with a full LTN system, have a depot with some boats sitting in it, and then have those automatically be dispatched to go out and collect resources when they're required. Whether we'll actually get to that point, I don't know. I somewhat doubt it. I suspect we'll probably just have lots and lots of ships, but at least if we drop in the logistic boat stops from the start, then we'll be able to use them in the future if we need to. The final resource to talk about is the titanium sludge, and as I was saying before, and I think the titanium is going to turn out to be the main resource on this planet, the one that we're going to build the exciting new technologies from, the one that we're going to be shipping off planet, and the one that's going to be required to make the science packs. Now, I haven't really looked into this yet. This is just a sort of a feeling and a suspicion I have, because it sounds a bit more exotic than, well, coconuts. And so Mike has been setting up an area over here to harvest the titanium sludge and then pass it through into a processing system. And the processing system he's only just sort of put the finishing touches on at the end, right at the end of the last stream. So it's not up and running properly yet, but it's but it is definitely coming together. And this system is quite a weird one with a number of steps required. So the titanium sludge can be turned into titanium dust, but in order to do so, you need to feed in a certain amount of fermentation bacteria, and it ends up creating a load of spoilage. So the fermentation bacteria, okay, well we can make that in a biochamber as well. So we bring in fish and we add in a little bit of fermentation bacteria, and then we make that weird Swedish fermented fish thing, and then we can output a load of fermentation bacteria. So it's sort of breeding the bacteria using the fish as a resource. Fine, okay, that produces the bacteria that we'll need. But that means we need a certain amount of fish. And so over here we have fish breeding, and that's where you bring in 2 fish and you produce 3 fish, but it requires a load of nutrients and some water to do so, because that's how making more fish works. Welcome to biology. And so this is going to require a steady stream of fish, which he's got here, and then as the fish die off and turn it into spoilage, that's going to get taken away, and well, there isn't really anywhere to take it at the moment because the whole system is jammed up. But you know, I did say this was a barely finished and still in the somewhat experimental stage. So let's head over there and see if we can fix it. The first thing is we're going to need some fermentation bacteria, and you can get that by mining some of the rocks on this planet. So there we go, there's 5 fermentation bacteria, and I've got 5 minutes before that expires, so I'd better get on a shift on. And here we are. So the first thing I'm going to do is collect up some spoilage and get that part of the system flowing again. Because if we can get the spoilage out, then we can start running the nutrients around like this, as you can see, and the system can get up and start working again. Then over here, once the nutrients arrive, well, I can put the fermentation bacteria in there into the input, and that's going to start running with the raw fish. And there we go. We're now starting to produce the fermentation bacteria. That's good. So those can be fed around here, and then that's going to pass them into the machines over here to allow them to start making the titanium dust. Now that's going to produce a lot of spoilage, and goodness knows what we're going to do with that. But okay, it's being passed out of the bottom here, ready to be made into the stone destruction planner things, and also down here to make more nutrients. So that's working quite nicely. And then you can see across the top here, we have a certain amount of titanium powder coming out, and that can be then fed into the furnaces over here, and that will then cook that down into titanium plates, which can then be passed over to another port over here, where we have a fairly similar system to the one you saw on my island, except there's no point in limiting this. This just wants to fill up with titanium completely. So we can chuck a load of titanium in here and fill it up, ready for a ship to come in and take it away. As I say, this system is not finished. I'm being a little bit mean coming in and taking a look at it now, but I needed to make another video, so yeah, no. But it does work. It just needs some safety features putting in so it can reliably start itself back up again and keep itself running. The other thing to note about this is that Mike needed to power this whole area, and that meant he put in his own separate coconut plantation area, which he's copy and pasted from my coconut island. That's fine. I mean, that's how a multiplayer game works. Somebody else makes something good, you go in and you make a copy of it, because there's no point in designing it again yourself from scratch. And then down here, well, there's a bit of a shortage of actual functioning machines at the moment because they've run out of nutrient. But once again, we're going to be taking the coconuts apart in order to make the coconut oil, which can then be fed up here along here to keep all of the machinery powered and run the nutrient production. Now, it's quite possible that in the long run this isn't actually going to be required, because this system will produce enough spoilage in order to keep the whole thing running. It'll be interesting to see whether that's actually the case, how much it's going to be producing. I can see at the moment that we do have a complete half belt of nutrient. The other half is still full of spoilage. Maybe I can pull that out somewhere. That needs to come out from down here. So if I pull some of this through, then there we go. We can get a bit more nutrient running through. We can get the looping properly, and just generally looking a little bit nicer. I don't think this actually matters, because having spoilage on one side of the belt is probably not an issue. But now we've got, yeah, basically a full belt going through. The whole system down here is now ticking away nicely. It's taking in all the spoilage that's coming from all the different places, but there is just too much of it at the moment. So yeah, some balance is going to be required around here. But it's quite possible that eventually he'll be able to deprecate this whole coconut production area and switch over to just using the spoilage to power all the bio plants over here. He does also need a certain amount of electricity, at least at the moment, because he's using the electric furnaces. However, I suspect those will be replaced with calcinators as soon as we reasonably can, and that will again require a supply of diesel or something. Now at the moment he's using coconut oil to power these inserters, but he's using the titanium sludge to power the ones over on the other side, because for some strange reason the titanium sludge also has a fuel value, so you can power machines off it. I think that's a thing we don't really want to do because it feels wrong, but also in a pinch, when you've got it being pumped through here, it is a convenient way of running the machines, I suppose, because he needs to be able to load and unload this biochamber here, but he also needs to be able to pump the titanium sludge into it, and so the titanium sludge kind of has to be here, so not running these inserters off titanium sludge would be a little bit more difficult. And I note that he's got 4 inserters around the machine, so he wouldn't be able to fit all of those onto one side, and that's 2 for the 2 inputs, for the nutrients and the bacteria, and then 2 for the outputs, the titanium powder and the spoilage. Now this could be condensed down. He could have the bacteria and the nutrients sharing a single belt, and he could have the spoilage and the dust sharing a single belt as well. But both of those would make the system a little bit more complicated and would require sorting to be done elsewhere. But it could be done if we really didn't want to use the titanium goop as a fuel source. So there are lots of decisions to be made around here. The system is working, but needs a little bit of tweaking to get it working reliably. But that's fine. As I say, it's a work in progress, and I'm being a little bit cheeky by showing it off at this stage. But we'll come back and see it properly finished probably in the next video, or at least in one upcoming quite soon. And so, I think that covers Pelagos for the progress we've made so far anyway. Over here we've got Coconut Island, where we're making lots and lots of coconut oil, we're making the husks to make the activated carbon, and the sealant that goes into all of the machinery. We've got our home island, where we're producing all of the things we need in the mall over here that Tristan built up in the first place, and then has since gone through and upgraded to diesel machines to save on the pollution. We've got iron processing going on over here as well. We've got a bit of coconut growing, but we'll gloss over that. We've got some power generation that we shouldn't have. We've got some calciners over here that are turning coconuts into activated carbon, but eventually we'll deprecate those and start using the carbon from over here. We've got methane being produced over here, and now soon to be produced over here as well. And we've got the titanium sludge being made over here. So I think that's some quite good progress. Things are going well on the island so far, and hopefully in our next couple of streams we'll make some real progress. We'll start actually being able to use the titanium for something exciting. Maybe we'll even start making science packs, and we'll start transporting all of the resources around between the islands a bit more and go for a slightly more specialised feel. I think this island very much is intended to encourage you to have separate outposts on different islands. So we have our titanium island, we have our coconut island, we'll have our mall island, or iron maybe, and then maybe an iron island up here, and then maybe we'll have science packs production on this island over here, and we'll have, and so on and so on, all those sort of things being done on the various different islands in order to try and produce all the different things we'll need without running out of space too much. Because this planet is very, very hostile to the idea of trying to generate more space. Because yes, you can put down the wooden platforms, but you can't really build any useful stuff on them. You certainly can't do any production. You can put down a little bit of landfill, but you can only go out a little way with that. So we can't really expand the island, which means we need to expand to other islands. And that's proven quite interesting so far. The other thing I should talk about, which is a sort of a secret extra thing, is the enemies on this planet. And we have these little critters called copper spitters. At the moment we've only got small ones, and they're not very dangerous. Even if I let them attack me, we can see that my shield will quite happily tank the damage from that, at least for a good while. And they come out of copper spitter spawners, and I believe from reading some of the box text that at some point in the future we are going to find some way to extract copper from these guys. We haven't got there yet. I mean, if I kill them, there's no drop from them, and even if I kite them out over land before I start shooting them, we still don't get any drops from them. So they don't appear to produce anything. But maybe there's something that's going to be similar to a capture rocket, where we're going to be able to come out and capture some of the copper spitter spawners and then start pulling copper out of them. I don't know. It'll be interesting to find out. But yes, these are the local fauna. They are not very dangerous. In fact, they are basically harmless. However, I do note that these are small ones, and I'm having flashbacks to Gleba, where we discovered the little wriggly guys at first and went, oh, these aren't very dangerous, and then a bit later their big brothers come along and step on your factory. So there's a decent chance that at some point in the future these guys will become a little bit more dangerous, and that's why we're trying not to spread the pollution out too far, even if we have discovered that the oil rigs do produce quite a bit of pollution, because apparently they're electrical and they'll connect themselves together if you give them half a chance as well. And so yes, these guys are the local natives. They are a little bit unfriendly, not particularly dangerous, but as I say, I have a feeling they are going to be a resource in the future for us. So that'll be something to look out for, and something interesting to have a play around with. That'll be something we'll be looking into in a future stream, so if you fancy watching, then please come along at 7:30 PM UK time, or every Monday, when we'll be carrying on with Pelagos until we get it up to exporting all the science we could possibly want, and then we'll nip off to another planet and see where we decide we want to go next. I'll be playing something else on Wednesday as well at 8 PM UK time. At the moment, I'm sort of between major series, so I'm going to be picking up some little things and giving them a try, see how they go, and trying some different things to give this channel a bit of variety before the next big series. If you fancy giving Planetary Pioneers a try yourself, then you can grab the mod from the Factorio mod portal. That'll give you all of the planets, including Pelagos, and all of the quality of life mods that we've been using as well. If you use the game seed 11111, then you should end up playing in the same universe as us, which will give you the same planets and the same challenges, same layout, same islands to play with, all that sort of stuff. And these videos will be coming out every Thursday and Friday, so keep an eye out for those. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss them. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.